Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Westworld. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love how I can't even speak. I love how this show is forever messing with your perception of time. Partway through it, I started figuring that time wasn't what we thought it was. What kind of tipped me off was obviously the whole thing with Maya. The moment Maya was like, right, she had this nightmare about the flies and stuff, I'm like, Maya and Dolores' story is super far into the future. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I was under the impression that she was Frankie. Because she started talking, I was like, right, what do they do with hosts? They end up like rewriting their narratives all the time. So it's like, that could be Frankie. Maya could be an older Frankie. But we end up meeting the real older Frankie. But regardless. But that's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, I was like, Charlotte won, didn't she? That's what it is. That Dolores is in a future. Once again, it's just like, perception of time and stuff like that. Because I was like, yeah, it had to be like 20-ish years, because like Frankie was like, what, maybe 7-ish, so it's like, yeah, it had to be like, we find out later on it's been 23 years, so it's like, oh, of course, dude. I was like, perception of time, and I was like, yeah, Charlotte had to have won because she was having those nightmares, and the moment Dolores was drawing that tower, I was like, oh my god, that's the thing that controls people, isn't it? And lo and behold, it is. That's what the tower is. And she draws it, and what does Maya almost not recognize it? I was like, oh my god. It's like the thing with hosts. Hosts don't recognize anything that could break their reality and reveal to them what they really are. Dude, once again, the show, the meta levels to it, especially with the layers of almost like, once again, it's almost like this interesting reboot. I mean, it's like, for Charlotte, it's like, right, humans plan to, like, already did all the groundwork with hosts in Westworld. I just took it and just flipped it on its head, which I think once again, it plays into this meta level of, regurgitating something, because Maeve talks about it later on, and she's like, no one knows this story inside and out, like, because the narrative is the same. So she's like, I've been stuck in this loop for 1,000 times, so she knew exactly how everything would play out that would allow her later on for her and Caleb to escape and everything, right? So I love that. She goes on a date, and lo and behold, who's on that date with her? None other than Teddy. And you're like, okay. And when they start talking, I was like, is this actually Teddy? But when he starts talking and he's so genuine, you're like, no, that's the real Teddy. So I'm like, did Charlotte get the portal open? Because that's what I'm wondering. Or is she like, did she remodel everyone based on who she remembers them to be? Because I think she was well versed enough in every like host in the park to probably revitalize them and bring them back. The fact, why else would Teddy be there? Because once again, I was under the impression like Bernard brought him back, but I figured but with episode 3, I was like, no, Bernard came back alone. So what was that about? But it's like, no, it seems like it's Teddy, and I love that he's like, yeah, I feel like I've known you for lifetimes. I'm like, Teddy! And even being like, yeah, I'm this, if you won't believe me what I used to do. She's like, oh, try me. He's like, I used to be a bounty hunter with the heart of gold. And I was like, oh, Teddy, dude. Holy crap. And then the whole situation of, she's like, right, I don't believe you. And he says this interesting line of, that's the thing, the unbelievable things end up being true, but the things we believe to be true are just stories we tell ourselves. And it's like, right, he would know that first and foremost, having been in their situation time and time and time again. I would have thought he would have been like, oh, I was a cowboy reenactor or something like that. I was kind of an actor. I thought like that'd be kind of the role but it's like, still, I thought he'd kind of lean into something like that. And he's like, oh, you're flirting with me. She's like, I'm not flirting with you. He's like, shame. Because it would be your turn or something like that. And I was like, is that the meta? Is that also meta because his whole thing was always pursuing Dolores, and now it's like, oh, after everything that's going on between us, it would be nice if the shoe was on the other foot and you were kind of flirting with me. And I love that he's like, here's a toast to wherever your path ends up taking you. Because obviously, like, Dolores doesn't remember him. And obviously, the last time he saw Dolores wasn't under the best of circumstances. I think they ended things decently enough, but once again, that was still during her Wyatt phase the last time they saw each other. they had so many lifetimes together, and yet it was also another lifetime, a whole bunch of lifetimes, because obviously how time works in this world, it's been 30 years now, 30 plus years since the events of season 2. So, and like thousands and thousands of years can pass in one human year for them. So it almost makes you go like, I mean, we have no idea how long Teddy's been in this world and stuff. Once again, why is Dolores here? Did Charlotte orchestrate that? But for what purpose, you know? And once again, I think it is the thing of Dolores, and my theory seems to be right, that it's like Dolores, maybe not just, I think maybe that's the irony behind it, that Dolores is being forced to write the narratives that are controlling people, but some people are still kind of breaking free of it to some extent. It seems like that's kind of Olympiad's, like I guess Olympiad is she's kind of the new Lee Sizemore, interestingly enough. But yeah, all of that's fascinating. On the flip side of things, kind of going back to Maeve and Charlotte, and Caleb, the flies are kind of infesting him, and he's like, right, this is the true purpose of Westworld. And it's like, right, because I thought it was like, right, you were collecting data again, like Delos, but it's like, no, the real truth is you're trying to get as many people to come back to Westworld, infect them, so they could go out and infect other people. He's like, they'll be carriers. And she's like, I prefer the term host. I was like, fuck you, Charlotte. I was like, oh, of course you would. Of course. It's like, right, your people have done this to us for so long, now it's like the shoe is on the other foot. I like that little trick Maeve did, where she basically boosted the sound, but in a frequency only hosts could hear, and basically turn off her own hearing, because she knew it wouldn't affect Caleb, but it was still like, the sound was so much that it shattered the glass. Luckily, they left with Charlotte and were heading out of Westworld. But the problem is, and I thought it was interesting that it's like, right, Dolores did everything for Caleb, and now Charlotte's like, right, Dolores and Maeve have taken such an interest in you, so why would I just want to kind of get rid of you? Because everything, like everyone killing themselves under her control, those were just the test results. It's like, right, you got to work out the kinks to the system, right? So I guess Caleb is like the first wave of people where it's like, oh, I won't have you kill yourself. We're gonna fully like test run it, probably entering somewhat of its final stages. But that's also the problem too. Charlotte looks like she's so in control. She just, despite everything being dragged along, it just seemed like nothing mattered. But everyone in the park essentially was made them enemy number one. Even Caleb, he only snapped back to himself because he got stabbed, which is, man, heavily wounded yet again, because we find out what happened all those years ago. I guess it makes sense. Their plans were to destroy the last of Rehoboam. I guess it makes sense. Like, of course, you wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. You had one large basket, but I guess maybe they made copies of Rehoboam, either like there were already copies scattered around the world, or like people like Sirach had those backed up, which, once again, where's Sirach? I mean, last time we saw him, he was wounded. He was still alive, but he probably could have bled out and died. So the fact is we haven't seen any of him. I mean, that, Charlotte could have always, there might be a version of him running around, or I don't know. I'm just surprised they haven't really kind of, because like I said, it just ends off where it seems like he might still be alive and out there, but his creation's dead, so especially because they made sure to destroy the last remnants of it, so I'm assuming Sirach is gone, because like no one's left to build it, and maybe it'd take years to build that up again, especially without his brother around, so. But during the process, Caleb almost died, and Maeve ended up, like, he's like, right, I guess I'll never get to know what it's like to be free, because, right, you're born into a system that dictated who you were and what you would do in life, what you wouldn't do in life, dictated every aspect of your life. And once again, ironically enough, we're kind of back to square one again. I guess Charlotte is, considering her circumstances, considering not only like, are you a copy of Dolores and you were struggling with your identity between being Dolores but not Dolores anymore, but also being Charlotte but not Charlotte, that, and once again, keeping the burn so that you remember kind of who you are, that you would now enslave other people. But it makes sense considering, right, all you've ever done was be at the behest of someone else. I even love the line from Maeve where she's like, I thought Wyatt was Dolores' darker side. And I guess it's like, right, never thought about it. Because I had actually let that slip my mind. I forgot that that's what Dolores was calling herself during, her rebellion leader days back when she was helping hunt down every guest in the park. But it's like, yeah, Charlotte is kind of Wyatt 2.0, just the revolution. I guess this is kind of going down the path where it's like, right, Charlotte was giving humanity an option, a chance, whereas like Dolores was giving them a chance. Charlotte is the version of Wyatt that just wanted to continue down her path instead of, that the Dolores who could see the beauty in things wanted to kind of give humanity an opportunity, a chance. And now Charlotte is this person who doesn't see the beauty in things and is willing to, but it's circumstances that led to that. So many things compiled, your life event or what kind of dictate and turn you into who you are. Combination nature-nurture type of situations. I think it's just a fascinating inverse to think about. It was interesting that, once again, Maeve was able to, circling back, Maeve was able to make Caleb feel like what it was like to have freedom. Because that feeling, Maeve has been holding on to it for so long, and she wanted Caleb to be able to feel that, too. And luckily was able to get him to help, but the problem was that when it was all said and done, she had to leave him behind because she wanted him to have that, like, at least she had everything like that time with her daughter, those memories, that's at least something she had. She didn't want Caleb just to fight to survive. She wanted him to have something worth fighting for, staying alive for. So the moment, like, it seems like Uwade was a nurse, and so so Maeve left him behind. It's like, right, she wanted him to have a life of his own, and so she wanted to leave him alone because it's like, as long as we're together, like, our kind have always been in this perpetual struggle, and as long as we're together, there will always be, like, there will always be trouble coming your way. Because for the first time in a long time, seeing him in that situation made her think about their mortality. Because, truth be told, there's only, like, 3 humans she's ever kind of gotten attached to. I'd say Lee's one of them. Sylvester and the other dude are probably the only 2, but I don't know I think Lee's probably a close second to, like, obviously, like, she deeply came to care about Caleb, and I was almost wondering, like, is there going to be, like, something between the both of you, host to human, regardless of all that, which is also, like, well, what they things end, it still could be a possibility, but that's always a possibility. But when it's all but what happened, what sparked all of this is that when Maeve took a look, it's what the problem was. It was like, it'd been 7 years, and she got curious, and she took a look at Caleb's life. She just took a tiny peek, and that's all it took for Charlotte to find them again. So it's like, yeah, that one mistake set this all in motion. So that's even more motivation, like, right, I'm going to get you back to your family and everything, because you have something worth fighting for now, so you got to go to your family. I got to make sure of it, because I think Maeve blames herself for setting this all in motion. And despite everything, once again, Charlotte acting so in control, because she takes control of Caleb and wants him to kill Maeve, but he doesn't. He shoots William instead, because he was able to resist. Dolores and Maeve took an attachment to him because he is a very special human in that regard. But even Charlotte was taken back for a minute there, but even then it was like, oh well, and Maeve ended up sacrificing herself. You know, it's like, right, the one lesson that I took away from Westworld, it's mutual satisfaction. You know, it's like, right. And then that line of see you in the next life, darling. And it's like, oh, mate. I was like, there's no way. It's like, there's no way she's dead. Because I figured what he was probably going to do is probably rip out her core. Because the way he said it, and I thought was kind of interesting, he was like, right, I think the people, like, Clementine is one of the people she brought back. It's like, they were the only, at least the other two that Clementine and the other person she brought back, they're probably the only remnants of OG Westworld left. Everyone else is gone, I think, so I don't know whether the plan was she was going to, like, destroy Maeve, or maybe she was going to once again, because I don't know what the Clementine thing is. Like, I don't know if that's a reprogramming of Clementine, like, wiped away her host data and rebooted her, or so I wiped away everything that she was. Were they going to do the same thing to Maeve, or were they going to destroy Maeve because she's too much of a weapon against them? Granted, Charlotte already upgraded the new host to kind of combat Maeve's abilities, so tying that in with everything with C and that's interesting, because it's like the moment it's like, oh, they're like tracking down an outlier, it's like, oh, they'll hunt her down, and I'm like, oh my god, I was like, at first I was like, is that what you guys are? You guys, I mean, they are the new outliers to some extent, but at first, before, you know, I realized, like, oh, that was taking place far into the future as well. Once again, the show messes with your perception of time. I love it. I love how much this show lies and hides stuff from me. I get giddy about it, because this show really gets off on, like, that's its number one thing. You know, it's like it loves messing with your perception of time. But I thought, like, obviously, like, because, you know, we end up finding out Bernard's story is taking place present day, 23. So Bernard's been gone for 30 years, not 27. I mean, not for the 7 you initially think he might have been gone, but it's like, no, he's been gone for 30 years in totality, so that's interesting. But what I was thinking was that these outliers were Sirach's original outliers that he had locked away and tried to reprogram. I thought this was them, but this is basically the next generation of outliers. They're the resistance of Charlotte's world and everything. That's what they really are. And obviously, Stubbs and Bernard get separated, and it's like, Stubbs is going with them. It's like, right, you'll be safe. And it's like, he's like, well, at least I'll be safe. It's like, no, it's not your safety. I don't know whether Bernard was saying, like, right, if we stuck together, it'd be an issue for me, or whether he's saying, like, Stubbs being with them will protect them because Stubbs will have their back. So, I don't know, it's interesting when Bernard's seen all of this kind of play out. So, he ran through stuff. So, now we have even more, like, no, he ran through a lot of simulations again. Once again, like, every 1 year is like, wasn't like 1,000 years, or like 7,000 years or something like that. If he's been in there for 30 years, yes, he's run through everything. He probably puts Doctor Strange to shame with the possibilities of how things could play out and every variable and everything. So he can put Doctor Strange to shame with how much he saw. But he goes with C to look for the weapon, and it pointed him in the right direction, which ends up being the demolition place. Once again, that reveal. And I was like, because especially when Caleb was like, my daughter's not going to grow up in a world controlled by you. And I was like, sadly, she does. But then we hard cut to C, and I was like, wait, is that... Like I said, I was under the impression it was going to be Maya, so it being C, I was like, that's... Okay, so that's where that is. And being an outlier just like her father, of course, it runs deep, it runs in her DNA. And now it makes sense why she uses the codename C, which obviously I have a special attachment to the codename C from a certain video game that I will not shut up about. It just kind of made me think of that immediately. But I'm like, yeah, she took her dad's initials. And it's like, of course. Because they probably avoid, like, real names. But it's probably like, yeah, she wanted to attach herself to, like, her dad, so she used the codename to kind of let go of her past, but also to hold on to it by being C. And in that moment after Maeve sacrificed herself, Kayla kind of passed out. She's like, oh, you okay there? You were out for a minute. I was like, what the fuck just happened in that minute? And then she's like, haven't we done this before? And Caleb's like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, don't you remember? I was like, no. And she's like, yeah, the men came in, weren't your men, they were mine. She killed Caleb. I was like, he's a fucking host now. Which is why I said, hey, things between him and Maeve could work out now. But it's kind of sad because it's sad to know that it took all these years, but Frankie had a feeling. She's like, right, my dad's body was, she heard a rumor that his body was there. I guess to cover up anything, I guess she took his body with her, I guess. I don't know. Like, not unless his body's somewhere in cold storage, like she's got it stored away, like, in a freezer. I don't know. Because I'm like, but then, like, her running everything, it's like, right. He's like, no, I'm still me. She's like, yeah, a version of yourself. This is, 278th version of you. And he's just kind of like, obviously the reality sinking in. And she's like, right, this is what your people did to us. And that's a complicated thing. Like, when you look at her face, she flips between both, where it seems there are moments where it seems like she genuinely feels bad about what she's doing, but then other moments she seems like she gets such delight out of it. And it's like, well, he's team host now. He's not human anymore, but he laid the groundwork for her work. Because he was proof that it wasn't foolproof, because I thought it was kind of an interesting thing. Like, there is that, like, from a psychological standpoint of the older you get, the harder it is to kind of break your habits. So it's easy, like, it's better to try and break habits when you're younger, because you're kind of more set in your ways when you're older. And because of that, the parasites weren't foolproof, but they were with children, which makes sense because children are malleable, so it makes sense that, like, a parasite controlling you, like, would. It's like, oh yeah, your children are so good at taking orders. So yeah, it's been 23 years, and now this isn't just the world, like, this is her world, you know? And at first I was almost like, do you think she's only taking, like, a small portion of where it's like, no, it's like, because I almost thought she created her own world, like, almost like a Westworld, which it kind of is, but now it's like, right, this was humanity's world for so long. It's ours now. It's like, how long did it take her to completely control the world? In 23 years, she has completely control of the world. A world where, humanity has been in control for millennia. I've been a dominating species for millennia, and now there's a new apex predator at the top of the food chain, And that's fascinating. And even that moment at the end, where, like, she froze everyone except for Caleb. It's like, oh, the beautiful inverse, because that's what always happened. It's like, oh, like, all hosts ceased motor function, and everyone would pause, and just, now it's like, right, all the humans would keep moving. That's how you prove, like, oh, who's a human and who isn't. But now it's like, right, the inverse says, like, the entire world is in the palm of her hands. Everyone's on her string set she's puppeteering. Once again, I figured Maya's story would be really her story. Like, I figured, like, once again, when I was under the belief that she was Frankie, I thought that was a narrative that was created for her, but which makes Maya's situation that much sadder, because that nightmare is reality. She just doesn't remember it. It's just her real memory's bleeding through. Like, it's still not 100% foolproof. There's still some. It's enough to keep the world under control, but once again, I think Maya might be one of those outliers. Maybe it's her connection to Dolores, like her being so close to Dolores is kind of causing that. I don't know. But the moment they were looking for, it's like, yeah, the weapon, Caleb's body isn't there, which, once again, why isn't it there? I'd assume Charlotte took it, but the weapon is. I was like, of course, fuck, Maeve. Maeve's always been the secret weapon. She's always, I was like, what is this going to be? And it's like, right, because she might be the only one that could undo all of this. So they've got to bring her back online after all this time. So, once again, like I said, still a possible future between her and Caleb. But what about Iwade? Like, we see, but I'm assuming her mom's not around, or either her mom's I'm curious, like, her mom could have died in that 23-year period. But once again, it's just like the rough reality that Caleb has to face. And once again, it's like the final line of the episode, you won. No, it's like, well, that was the second line, but she's like, welcome to my world. Well, I think the final, yeah. And then the tower and everything. Once again, humans can't see it, but because Dolores is a host, but she's been rewritten like the humans have been, like she has been in the past. So now she's kind of being like a host, where it's like she can kind of see the tower, but no one else can. Because remember that guy was like, oh, I can see the tower. It's like, once again, hosts are meant to not be able to see the truth of their reality. Anything that contradicts what they believe to be their reality. When they start seeing it's meant to be a blind spot that they can't quite ever see until, it kind of starts breaking through, so. Halfway through the season, and Charlotte's already won. I mean, technically, she's won since the beginning. We've been, once again, our perception of time, so I'm assuming going forward we're going to be in that 23-year time skip period. It's like, once again, I was like, oh man, this show time skipping 7 years is like, I mean, once again, it's just like the William thing. It's like between a young William and Ed Harris, between Jimmy Simpson and Ed Harris of when it came to William's character. So, which we do know he's still alive. Her keeping him on cold storage means even more. Well, I was like, no, because that probably could have still been in the past, maybe, after that 7 years. But now, he might still be around even in the future, because it's stasis, so she probably takes him out every once in a while. So he could still be kicking it all these years later just because of that as well. But I am so fascinated to see where the back half of this season ends up taking us. Obviously, Bernard is helping them get Maeve back online. She can be the ultimate weapon. Maybe that's why she believed in the weapon so much, because she met Maeve all those years ago. She probably heard stories about her from her dad when she was younger. But Maeve saved her when she was, 23 years ago. So, and Maeve was the last person she saw with her dad before, he died. So, either way, it's going to be interesting to see where the back half of this season takes us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.